The Xyrax Empire crumbled as human fleets cut them down in a merciless campaign of total genocide. Mankind would not relent until every last Xyrax warrior king in the galaxy lay dead and dismembered on the battlefield. In a dimly lit corner of a seedy spaceport bar, two Betazoid diplomats sat huddled close together. Their hushed whispers could barely be heard over the raucous laughter and clinking glasses of alien patrons. Umbra, the senior of the two, his weathered face a mask of grim determination, leaned in close. "It's the humans, Zor-El. They wiped out the Xyrax, every last one of them." Zor-El nearly choked on his drink, his bulbous eyes going wide with shock. He glanced around the bar, making sure no one was eavesdropping. "That's impossible. The Xyrax were the most fearsome predators in the galaxy. They obliterated entire star systems without breaking a sweat." Zor-El leaned forward, his voice trembling. "What happened?" Umbra's gaze grew distant as he recounted the tale. The Xyrax expected an easy victory, but the humans fought with a savagery that caught them completely off guard. They used guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, and weapons we've never encountered before. The Xyrax raiders were slaughtered to the last. Zor-El shook his head in disbelief. But that was just one battle. Surely the Xyrax Empire could have crushed them with sheer numbers. Umbra's voice dropped to a whisper. "That's what the Xyrax thought. They launched a full-scale invasion of human space, determined to wipe them out once and for all. But the humans, they were ready. They had studied the Xyrax's tactics, their weaknesses, exploited them without mercy." Zor-El felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" Umbra's eyes narrowed. "The humans used bioweapons tailored specifically to Xyrax physiology, viruses that liquefied their organs from the inside out. They hacked into the Xyrax's computer systems and turned their own ships against them. They even weaponized asteroids, hurling them at Xyrax worlds with devastating precision." Zor-El's mouth went dry. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. "And the Xyrax, what happened to them?" Umbra's voice was barely audible over the din of the bar. "Extinct. The humans hunted down every last one of them. They bombarded their homeworld until nothing was left but a radioactive wasteland. They pursued the survivors across the galaxy, ruthlessly exterminating them wherever they found them." Zor-El sat back in his chair, his mind reeling. The implications were staggering. If the humans could wipe out the Xyrax, the most powerful empire in the known universe, what chance did anyone else have? Umbra leaned forward, his eyes burning with intensity. "We have to warn the others, Zor-El. The humans are coming and they won't stop until they've conquered the entire galaxy. We need to unite the remaining races, pool our resources, and find a way to stop them before it's too late." Zor-El nodded, his resolve hardening. He knew the task ahead would be the greatest challenge of their lives. But the alternative, to sit back and watch as the humans slaughtered their way across the stars, was unthinkable. Together, the two Betazoid diplomats rose from their seats and strode out of the bar, their minds already racing with plans and strategies. They had a galaxy to save, and time was running out. Zor-El leaned forward eagerly, intrigued by this new twist in the tale. But surely that was just a stroke of luck on the humans' part. The Xyrax must have simply underestimated them, caught off guard by an unfamiliar adversary. Umbra shook his head, a knowing glint in his eye. That's precisely what the Xyrax believed at first as well. They dispatched a more formidable force to the human colony, this time under the command of one of their most accomplished generals, a ruthless tactician by the name of Kravel. Kravel was supremely confident in his ability to crush the humans with ease, and he boldly broadcasted his plans to the entire Xyrax Empire, promising a swift and decisive victory. Umbra paused for a moment, taking a slow sip of his drink before continuing his account. But the humans were prepared for their arrival. They had a leader of their own, a brilliant strategist named James Scorer. Scorer had meticulously studied the Xyrax's tactics and technology, and he had devised a cunning plan to turn their own strengths against them. Zor-El listened intently as Umbra painted a vivid picture of the battle that followed. When Kravel's forces landed on the colony, they found themselves walking straight into a carefully laid trap. The humans had set up a series of ambushes and choke points, using the colony's terrain to their advantage. They employed guerrilla tactics, striking hard and fast before melting away into the shadows, leaving the Zyrax confused and disoriented. Thumbra's voice grew more animated as he described the humans' devastating counterattack. Kravol's forces were picked off one by one until only the general himself remained standing. In a final, desperate gambit, Kravol challenged Skora to single combat, hoping to salvage some semblance of honor from the debacle. Zor-El's eyes widened as Umbra revealed the outcome of the duel. But Skora was a master of hand-to-hand combat, and he easily defeated the Zyrax general, sending a clear message to the rest of the galaxy. The humans were not to be trifled with. Zor-El sat back in his chair, his mind reeling from the implications of Umbra's tale. He shook his head in disbelief, trying to process the sheer scope of the humans' accomplishments. "Incredible," he muttered, his voice tinged with awe. "I had no idea the humans were so formidable, but even so, surely the Zyrax could have regrouped, adapted their strategies, and come back stronger." Umbra sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping as if weighed down by the memories. "That's what they tried to do," he said, his voice tinged with a mix of admiration and fear. The Zyrax High Command was furious after the defeat on the human colony. They couldn't believe that a primitive species like the humans could have bested them so thoroughly. They became obsessed with revenge, pouring all their resources into building a massive fleet to crush the humans once and for all. Umbra paused, taking a sip of his drink before continuing. "They even allied with the Zorgans, another powerful warrior race, in order to bolster their numbers. The Zyrax-Zorgan alliance was a formidable force, one that would have struck fear into the hearts of any other species in the galaxy." Zor-El leaned forward, his eyes wide with anticipation. "But the humans had a trick up their sleeve, didn't they?" Umbra nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The humans had something the Zyrax and the Zorgans didn't. A spy within their ranks. A human agent named Marcus Rain had managed to infiltrate the Zyrax High Command, posing as a Zorgan mercenary." Umbra shrugged, his expression one of grudging respect. Rain was a master of disguise and deception. He had spent years studying the Zorgons, learning their language, their customs, their mannerisms. By the time he infiltrated the Zyrax High Command, he was practically indistinguishable from a real Zorgan. Zor-El shook his head in amazement. "And what did Rain do once he was inside?" Umbra's eyes gleamed with a fierce light. Rain fed the humans information about the Zyrax's plans, allowing them to stay one step ahead of their enemies. When the Zyrax-Zorgan fleet finally launched their attack on the human homeworld, they found themselves walking into yet another trap. Zor-El leaned forward, his heart pounding with excitement. "What kind of trap?" Umbra's voice was barely above a whisper now. The humans had set up a minefield around their planet, using a new type of mine that was invisible to the Zyrax's sensors. The mines tore through the Zyrax and Zorgon ships like tissue paper, leaving them crippled and adrift in space. Zor-El let out a low whistle of appreciation. "And then what happened?" Umbra's smile widened, his eyes gleaming with a fierce pride. "That was when the human fleet arrived, led by none other than James Skora himself. In a lightning-fast attack, the humans decimated the remaining Zyrax and Zorgan forces, leaving no survivors. The once mighty Zyrax Empire was reduced to ashes, and the Zorgons fled back to their own territory, never to be heard from again." Zor-El shook his head in disbelief. "I had heard rumors of the Zyrax's defeat, but I never imagined it was so complete. The humans must have celebrated their victory for cycles on end." Umbra nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "They did, but not in the way you might think. The humans are a strange species, Zor-El. They don't revel in conquest the way the Zyrax did. Instead, they turned their attention inward, focusing on rebuilding and strengthening their own society." He paused, taking a sip of his drink before continuing. "They formed new alliances with other species, not through force or coercion, but through diplomacy and mutual respect. In fact, that's how I first came into contact with the humans myself. Zor-El leaned forward, his interest piqued. Oh, how so? Umbra smiled, his eyes taking on a distant look as he recalled the memory. I was part of a Betazoid delegation, sent to negotiate a trade agreement with them. I was expecting to meet a race of bloodthirsty warriors, but instead, I found a people who were intelligent, curious, and eager to learn about other cultures. He shook his head, a hint of admiration in his voice. They treated us with kindness and respect, even though they had every reason to be wary of outsiders after their experience with the Zyrax. Zor-El's brow furrowed. So what happened during the negotiations? Did the humans drive a hard bargain? Umbra chuckled, a low rumbling sound that seemed to come from deep within his chest. Not at all. In fact, they were remarkably fair and even-handed. They didn't try to take advantage of us or press for unfair concessions. Instead, they worked with us to find mutually beneficial solutions. He paused, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I remember being particularly impressed by their lead negotiator, a woman named Samantha Carlyle. She had a way of cutting through the posturing and getting to the heart of the matter. She was tough, but also compassionate. Umbra's eyes took on a faraway look, as if he were seeing something beyond the confines of the dimly lit bar. She reminded me a lot of James Scorer, actually. They both had that same quiet strength, that same unwavering sense of purpose. Zor-El nodded thoughtfully, absorbing Umbra's words. It sounds like the humans are a force to be reckoned with, both on the battlefield and at the negotiating table. But surely they must have some weakness, some vulnerability that could be exploited. Umbra frowned, his brow furrowing as he considered the question carefully. You know, that's what the Kilthari thought as well, he said, his voice taking on a somber tone. They were a race of master manipulators, known throughout the galaxy for their ability to turn even the strongest alliances against each other. When they saw the humans' growing influence and power, they saw them as a threat to their own dominance. Umbra leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting up to the ceiling as he recalled the story. The Kilthari set out to undermine the humans in any way they could. They started by spreading rumors and disinformation, trying to sow distrust and discord among the humans' allies. They even went so far as to sabotage a few of the humans' trade deals, making it look like the humans had gone back on their word. Zor-El's eyes widened in surprise. That's a bold move, even for the Kilthari. How did the humans respond? Umbra's lips curled into a small smile. That's the thing. They didn't react the way the Kilthari expected. Instead of lashing out in anger or seeking revenge, the humans simply doubled down on their efforts to build stronger, more honest relationships with their allies. They reached out to those who had been swayed by the Kilthari's lies, offering transparency and open communication. Zor-El looked puzzled, his head tilting to the side. But why would they do that? Why not just crush the Kilthari and be done with it? Umbra chuckled softly. Because that's not who the humans are, Zor-El. They believe in something called soft power, the idea that you can influence others through attraction and persuasion, rather than coercion or force. They knew that if they reacted with violence or aggression, they would only be playing into the Kilthari's hands. He leaned forward, his eyes sparkling with admiration. So instead, the humans focused on being the best allies they could be. They worked tirelessly to build trust and goodwill with those who had been swayed by the Kilthari's lies. They shared information freely, offered assistance wherever it was needed, and always kept their word. Zor-El's eyes widened in realization. And it worked, didn't it? Umbra nodded, a satisfied smile spreading across his face. It did indeed. The humans' allies saw through the Kilthari's deceptions and rallied around the humans, isolating the Kilthari and cutting them off from the rest of the galactic community. The Kilthari's power crumbled, and they were left with no choice but to surrender to the humans and beg for mercy. Zor-El shook his head in amazement. Incredible! The humans managed to defeat the Kilthari without firing a single shot. Umbra's expression turned pensive, his gaze drifting off into the distance. It just goes to show the true power of the humans, Zor-El. They don't just win through brute force or superior technology. They win through the strength of their character, through their unwavering commitment to their allies and their values. And that, my friend, is a power that cannot be underestimated. Zorel shook his head in amazement, his eyes wide with disbelief. Incredible, he breathed. The humans are like nothing I've ever encountered before. To show such mercy and compassion, even to their enemies. He trailed off, his mind struggling to comprehend the sheer magnitude of the humans' actions. Umbra nodded sagely, taking another long sip of his drink before setting the glass down on the table with a soft clink. It's not something you see every day, that's for sure, he agreed. But that's just the way the humans are. They believe that everyone deserves a chance at redemption, no matter how far they've fallen. Zorel leaned forward, his brow furrowed in thought. But what happened to the Kilthari after they surrendered? He asked. Surely the humans must have punished them severely for their treachery. Umbra chuckled softly, shaking his head. That's the thing, Zorel, he said. The humans didn't punish the Kilthari at all. Instead, they showed them mercy and compassion, just like they did with everyone else. Zorel's mouth fell open in shock. They let them go, he sputtered. After everything the Kilthari had done. Umbra nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. The humans believed that punishing the Kilthari would only breed more resentment and hatred, he explained. They knew that the cycle of violence would never end if they responded in kind, so instead they chose to break that cycle. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes taking on a distant look as he recalled the events that followed. The humans offered the Kilthari aid and support, helping them to rebuild their infrastructure and establish new trade relationships with other species. They even sent some of their own experts to work with the Kilthari, teaching them new ways of thinking and problem-solving. Zorel listened intently, his mind racing with the implications of Umbra's words. And did it work? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Did the Kilthari change their ways? Umbra's smile widened, and he nodded once more. They did, he confirmed. It took time, of course, and there were some who resisted the humans' efforts at first. Old habits die hard, as they say. But slowly, steadily, the Kilthari began to see the value in the humans' approach. He paused for a moment, as if searching for the right words. They started to cooperate more with other species, to see them as partners, rather than rivals or enemies. And as they did, their society began to thrive in ways it never had before. Trade flourished, new technologies were developed, and old grudges were forgotten. Zorel shook his head in wonder, his eyes shining with admiration. They even became one of the humans' strongest allies, he murmured, almost to himself, working together on countless projects and initiatives to make the galaxy a better place. Umbra nodded, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. Exactly, he said. The humans showed us all that there's another way, a better way, that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope for a brighter future. Zorel fell silent for a moment, his gaze drifting off into the distance as he pondered the implications of Umbra's tale. The humans were truly a remarkable species, he realized, with a wisdom and compassion that seemed to know no bounds. Zorel listened in rapt attention as Umbra described the humans' efforts. He could scarcely believe the tales of their ingenuity and bravery in the face of such an incomprehensible threat. The harmonic cannon, Zorel repeated, his voice hushed with awe. How did they even conceive of such a thing? Umbra shook his head, a wry smile playing at his lips. That's the thing about humans. They have a way of looking at problems from angles that would never occur to most species. Where others saw only hopelessness and despair, they saw an opportunity. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant as he recalled the frantic energy of those days. The humans worked tirelessly, pouring all their resources into the harmonic cannon project. Their greatest scientific minds came together, sharing knowledge and pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible. Zorel tried to imagine it. The humans hunched over their consoles, running simulation after simulation, refining their designs in a desperate race against time. It must have been a monumental undertaking, he said softly. Umbra nodded. It was, but the humans were determined. They knew that the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and they refused to give up. He took a sip of his drink, savoring the burn as it slid down his throat. And then, after cycles of tireless effort, they finally had a working prototype, a weapon that could strike at the very heart of the Void Wraith's existence. Zordal leaned forward, his heart pounding with anticipation. And did it work? Were they able to use it against the Wraiths? Umbra's expression grew somber. They were. But it came at a great cost. The harmonic cannon required an enormous amount of energy to function, more than any single ship could provide, and so the humans made a decision, one that would echo through the ages. He paused, his eyes meeting Zor-El's with an intensity that made the younger Betazoid shiver. They chose to sacrifice their own ships, their own people, to power the cannon. Dozens of human vessels flew directly into the heart of the Void Wraith's swarm, their cores overloading and detonating in a blaze of pure, harmonically attuned energy. Zor-El felt a lump form in his throat, his eyes stinging with sudden tears. "They gave their lives," he whispered, "to save us all." Umbra nodded, his own eyes glistening in the dim light of the bar. They did, and in that moment, as the harmonic cannon fired and the Void Wraiths screamed in agony, their connection to our reality severed forever, the galaxy knew a unity it had never known before, a unity born of gratitude, of awe, of the knowledge that we had witnessed something truly remarkable. He raised his glass, his voice rough with emotion. "To the humans," he said softly, "the saviors of the galaxy." Zor-El raised his own glass, his hand trembling slightly as he clinked it against Umbra's. "To the humans," he echoed, his heart full of a reverence he had never known before. "May their sacrifice never be forgotten." Zor-El listened in rapt attention as Umbra described the humans' efforts. He could scarcely believe the tales of their ingenuity and bravery in the face of such an incomprehensible threat. "The harmonic cannon," Zor-El repeated, his voice hushed with awe. "How did they even conceive of such a thing?" Umbra shook his head, a wry smile playing at his lips. "That's the thing about humans. They have a way of looking at problems from angles that would never occur to most species. Where others saw only hopelessness and despair, they saw an opportunity." He leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant as he recalled the frantic energy of those days. The humans worked tirelessly, pouring all their resources into the harmonic cannon project. Their greatest scientific minds came together, sharing knowledge and pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible. Zor-El tried to imagine it. The humans hunched over their consoles, running simulation after simulation, refining their designs in a desperate race against time. "It must have been a monumental undertaking," he said softly. Umbra nodded. It was, but the humans were determined. They knew that the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and they refused to give up. He took a sip of his drink, savoring the burn as it slid down his throat. And then, after cycles of tireless effort, they finally had a working prototype, a weapon that could strike at the very heart of the Void Wraith's existence. Zor-El leaned forward, his heart pounding with anticipation. And did it work? Were they able to use it against the Wraiths? Umbra's expression grew somber. They were, but it came at a great cost. The harmonic cannon required an enormous amount of energy to function, more than any single ship could provide, and so the humans made a decision, one that would echo through the ages. He paused, his eyes meeting Zor-El's with an intensity that made the younger Betazoid shiver. They chose to sacrifice their own ships, their own people, to power the cannon. Dozens of human vessels flew directly into the heart of the Void Wraith's swarm, their cores overloading and detonating in a blaze of pure, harmonically attuned energy. Zor-El felt a lump form in his throat, his eyes stinging with sudden tears. "They gave their lives," he whispered, "to save us all." He raised his glass, his voice rough with emotion. "To the humans," he said softly, "the saviors of the galaxy." Zor-El stared at Umbra in disbelief, his mind reeling from the revelation. The idea that anyone could turn against the humans, after all they had done for the galaxy, seemed unthinkable. He leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "But why would they do that? Why would they turn on the humans after everything they've accomplished?" Zor-El shook his head, his brow furrowed in confusion. But that's not who the humans are. They've never sought to conquer or control. They've only ever wanted to help, to make the galaxy a better place. Umbra nodded, a sad smile playing at the corners of his mouth. You and I know that, Zor-El, but not everyone sees it that way. They look at the humans' strength, their technology, their resourcefulness, and they see a threat. They see a species that could crush them if they wanted to. Zor-El fell silent for a moment, considering Umbra's words. He thought back to all the stories he had heard about the humans, all the incredible things they had achieved. The idea that anyone could see them as a danger seemed absurd. But as he looked around the bar, at the other patrons huddled over their drinks, whispering to each other in low, furtive tones, he began to understand. The humans had become a symbol of hope and unity for the galaxy, but they had also become a target for those who feared change, who clung to the old ways of thinking. Zor-El turned back to Umbra, his expression one of grim determination. So what do we do? How do we stop this before it's too late? Umbra leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. We do what the humans have always done, Zor-El. We stand together. We reach out to those who have turned away, and we remind them of all that the humans have done for us. We show them that the path of fear and mistrust will only lead to ruin. Zor-El nodded, his resolve hardening. He knew that the task ahead would not be easy, that there would be many who would resist their efforts, but he also knew that the alternative, a galaxy torn apart by suspicion and hostility, was too terrible to contemplate. He raised his glass, his eyes locked with Umbra's. To the humans, he said, his voice ringing with conviction, and to the unity they have brought to the galaxy. May we never forget the sacrifices they have made, or the lessons they have taught us. Umbra raised his own glass, his expression one of solemn agreement. To the humans, he echoed, his voice filled with a quiet reverence, and to the future we will build together, in the light of their example. The two Betazoids clinked their glasses together, the sound echoing through the crowded bar like a promise. They knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, that there would be many challenges to overcome. But they also knew that they would face those challenges together, united by their faith in the humans and their vision for a better galaxy. Zor-El shook his head, his mind reeling with the revelation. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on Umbra. I can't believe it. The humans, the saviors of the galaxy, just gone. Umbra nodded, his expression somber. It was a shock to everyone. One day they were there, the next nothing. Their ships, their stations, all empty. It was like they'd never existed at all. Zor-El frowned, trying to wrap his mind around it. But why? Why would they just leave like that after everything they'd done, everything they'd sacrificed? Umbra sighed, his shoulders slumping. They saw the writing on the wall, Zor-El. They knew that their presence was only making things worse. The other species, they were jealous of the humans' power, their influence. They saw them as a threat, a rival to be destroyed. He shook his head, his voice tinged with bitterness. The humans tried to reason with them to find a peaceful solution, but it was no use. The more they tried to help, the more they were resented. In the end, they realized that the only way to prevent a galactic war was to remove themselves from the equation entirely. Zor-El sat back in his chair, stunned, and so they left just like that. Zor-El felt a sudden surge of anger, of frustration. But what about the rest of us? What about the galaxy they left behind? What happened to us? Umbra's expression darkened, his voice low and bitter. What always happens when there's a power vacuum, Zor-El? The strongest, the most ruthless, they stepped in to fill the void. The Xerax, the Kilthari, the Zorgons, all the old rivalries, the ancient grudges, they all came boiling back to the surface. He shook his head, his eyes distant. Within a decade, the galaxy was in chaos, war, strife, destruction. It was like the humans had never been there at all. All their efforts, all their sacrifices, all for nothing. Zor-El felt a crushing sense of despair wash over him. He looked down at his hands, his voice barely a whisper. So that's it then? The humans' legacy, everything they fought for. It was all for nothing. Umbra was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the confines of the dingy bar. Then slowly he shook his head. No, Zor-El. Not for nothing. He reached out, placing a hand on the younger Betazoid's shoulder. The humans, they showed us something. They showed us that even the weakest, the most insignificant among us, can rise up and make a difference. That true strength, true power, it doesn't come from conquest or domination. It comes from compassion, from courage, from the willingness to fight for what's right. Umbra's eyes blazed with a fierce, determined light. The humans may be gone, but their example remains. Their legacy lives on, in the hearts and minds of those who still remember, those who still believe in their ideals, who still strive to make the galaxy a better place. He stood up, his voice ringing out clear and strong. The humans' sacrifice, it wasn't in vain, Zor-El. As long as there are those who carry on their fight, who keep their memory alive, then maybe, just maybe, there's still hope for us all. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.